So the thing that really interested me was about stories of heritage, stories which capture who we are as people. If you look at the rum world, there are some really difficult and unsettling brand stories there that avoid the reality of how rum sugar came to be, that we infuse rums with ingredients was actually about medicinal purposes. So they're very different from simply drinking for purely pleasure. It was a very different route to that.
Welcome to the African Descendants Forum Movers and Shakers. Today, we're delighted to have a proud son of Huddersfield, Cashain David, one of the founders and owners of the award-winning Kromanti Rum. Rooted in the rich history of the African diaspora's ancestral homelands, Kromanti Rum celebrates culture, tradition, and the power of natural ingredients. In this interview, we delve into their inspiring journey of recentering the rum narrative and honoring their heritage through a unique range of rums infused with Caribbean herbs, spices, and fruits. So join us as we uncover the untold stories behind Kromanti Rum and explore the profound connection between spirits, history, and community. So welcome, Cashain. It's great to have
Thank
you here with us today. Let's get straight into it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. I don't often come up to Huddersfield, but when I do, I really enjoy myself.
Well, as you said, you're a Huddersfield boy, born and bred. So just to begin with, can you tell us about your Huddersfield roots and growing up in this wonderful town we call Huddersfield?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Springwood, very near the Greenhead Park, and part of a large Karakuyan family. I'm one of the younger ones, and yeah, really enjoyed growing up here as part of that larger, wider community. There was always a wedding or a christening or something where we really knew each other. We knew each other as family. There was always people around. So I really enjoyed that. I went to school at Roy Hall, and for a very short time at Greenhead College until they decided to ask me not to come back again. And then I went on to the Technical College, and that was before I went to London for university.
I'd like to start by just asking you um, two interrelated questions. What inspired you to start Kromanti Rum, and also when did you start? Can you share a specific moment or experience that led you to this realization?
Yeah, it was. It's been a very slow burn. Now that I look back and I can see that this was something that it was a direction I was always going to go in. So the thing that really interested me was about stories of heritage, stories which capture who we are as a people, who we are as families, who we are um, as a result of the experiences we've had from the Caribbean into England. But there were two moments that really came together and really made me start thinking about the need to take action. One was I became very interested in rum and used to go to the rum festival in London. The first one was in London, and I'd been going to it for a number of years and thought this is really great fun. But I had a moment of clarity, and that was around about 10 years ago, where I was standing in the middle of the rum fest and I suddenly looked around and saw all the brands and their stories. And I thought, none of these stories are about us, the people who were used to create the rum and our experience of rum and our connection with it. Um, so that was one moment, and that really started me thinking quite differently about. But that's not how I understand rum, and certainly growing up, growing up in a Caribbean household, that was not what I saw. There were no pirates in my stories or in my heritage. It was all very different relationships. But the other thing I think which hastened that the decision to take action was COVID. So I was working in mental health, so working throughout the whole of the COVID period, and I became acutely aware of many of our elders who were being lost during that period. It was a very tough time, and it made me think that every time one of our elders dies or passes on, we lose stories, we lose history, we lose heritage, we lose an understanding. So all of those things coming together made me think about an aspect of the rum narrative, which really is very little understood in the rum world, which is how we've understood rum. You know, it marks those occasions from birth, marriage, death, when people are being remembered the year after and pouring of libations. And also the fact that in the way that we infuse rums with ingredients was actually about medicinal purposes. So they're very different from simply drinking for purely pleasure. It was a very different route to that. Now, those are the things that were swirling around in my head. So I started interviewing people and started collecting and writing down stories and also recipes and these sayings. So a range of different things then came together in order to coalesce as Kromanti Rum, which is very much about when you're looking for a story, the best story you can tell is your own story, of the story of your people and story of your families. So those were the stories that I was exposed to, and those are the ones that I thought the strongest thing I can do is tell our story, my story within the rum world.
Oh, that's really powerful, man. Before we move on into maybe some of the challenges that you faced in disrupting this rum narrative, I just wanted to ask you, where did the name come from?
The name Cromanti is, again, it's something that we've always grown up around and it's been part of our heritage. But to my shame, I wasn't aware of it. I wasn't aware of the connections until I started to find out more about my extended family and our history on the island of Karaku. So there's a very famous Cromanti in Grenadian history called Kromanti Kojo. And 1796, he was involved with another mixed overseer he was on the plantation called Julian Fedon. Between them, they then revolted against the English on the island, overthrew the British, and set up a maroon colony on the interior of the island. Now, these are stories that I had to relearn because they weren't things that were generally talked about, but certainly very much embedded in our history. And for those of you who are from Carriacou, it's one of the few places, for those of you from Huddersfield, it's one of the few places that they still perform the Carriacou Big Drum Dance. Now, to open the circle, the first song that they sing, the first prayer after the libations, is a prayer to the spirit of Kromanti Kudjo. So this is something which is very much a Carriacouan story. When I was spending a lot of time with marketing people, they were really astounded that we had these stories. And I just thought, well, this is just who we are. This is not a made up story. It's something that I am simply amplifying and retelling to ensure that it survives across from one generation onto another.
Yeah, it's really great that it's not just about the liquid, but it's also
Well,
about the
yeah,
story.
yeah, and that's really where I came in. So, I mean, Edwin, you'll know, we didn't grow up with alcohol. We didn't drink alcohol, but there was always alcohol in the house. So my parents, when people would come, when somebody would come back from being overseas, there was always be rum that was brought. Even if we didn't drink it, I understood from a very small age about how the big people used it. I understood how they would pour a little bit on the floor, and I was fascinated by this. So 30 years later, I then started to look into what was all that about and how does it relate to this liquid that now I drink that actually has so much meaning, but none of it seems to appear in the rum world. And that was the thing that really led me to say, actually, the strongest thing I can do is tell my story and invite other people to tell their story.
So this unique approach that you're using to, as it were, in your own words, disrupt the rum narrative and introducing a more authentic story must have um, made challenges arise. How have you gone about overcoming some of these challenges?
Yeah, I have a very simple approach, which is I don't look left, I don't look right. I tell my story, and what other people are doing is really down to them. The fact that we are in that space telling a different story prompts others to think, why didn't I know this story? And actually, there's more to this than just the liquid in the bottle. And I think that's very much our approach because if you look at the rum world, there are some really difficult and unsettling brand stories there that are that avoid the reality of how rum sugar came to be and how people um, were abused in order for that to happen. And it's a real sidestep of that. So I think rather than saying we're going to come in and critique all these brands, they have made their decision. This is ours. And I think it's about focusing our energy on retelling our story and also opening up opportunities for other people to step into that and also tell those stories. We've met some incredible people as a result of this and collected some new recipes. You know, give you a quick example. A good friend of mine now from Barbados, and his wife was telling me about how they use gully root in order to put in the rum to infuse it. And his older uncle is 105, has been drinking it every day, swears by it. But those are the sorts of stories that we do need to continue to hear and value, because if we don't value our own stories and our own recipes and our own culture, rituals, and customs, we can't expect other people to.
You've touched there on using these different herbs and spices, fruits. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the significance of that, and how do these ingredients contribute to the overall experience and connection
Yeah,
to Caribbean and African culture?
yeah. So one of the ones, our signature rum, which is a tamarind infused rum, is is based on a story that my mum told me about growing up in the island of Carriacou and how the thing when the rains stopped, the things they could rely on was the tamarind tree. And I was fascinated by this story. I mean, it was about 5 years before she passed. And she told me this story. And I then started to develop that into an infused rum and then go through the whole process of, preparing it for production and distillation and a range of different things like that. But I think the interesting part of that is the fact that she was very clear about how they could use the tamarind tree, not just the fruit, but also the leaves to dry them and to make a tea. Now, there are certain uh, the older people know much more about what are the benefits of these things. And so, hearing about the benefit of tamarind leaves to make a tea, because of menstrual cramps, which is not something that I had ever heard of before, but also the way in which tamarind is really good. It's antioxidants, good for high blood pressure, a range of different things like that. And we have that knowledge of a range of different ingredients and natural compounds that people, and particularly older people, know, and that information is passed down from one generation orally. And so we're trying to capture all of that in order so that we can make sure that those things are captured and passed on for that next generation.
I'm 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 just fascinated. I'm just fascinated.
That
Um,
was me 15 years ago thinking, why did I not understand and know
yeah,
all of this? But obviously, I mean, when I became a parent, it became really important to me because I was really keen to make sure that I was enabling my children to have this connection to the Caribbean, to our heritage and our culture. And I was looking for a way to do that. And initially started off with actually jelly shots, which was infused with a lot of things, with guava, with hibiscus and sorrel, a range of different things. And that was the way I was doing it. And people then tasted, you would have hated it, Edwin, because every family occasion, I would bring out these things and get people to taste them and say, what do you think of this? And what do you think of this? And then people started tasting the infused rum before I put it into the jelly and said, this rum is good enough to drink. And then we did some public tastings and went into product development. And from that, it coalesced into what we know as Kromanti Rum now. But it's all about valuing who we are and our own stories.
uh,
I spent the last 35 years um, developing mental health services for the Black community, which I describe as very much about helping people to understand and to own their own story. And so, in doing that, it gave me a lot of insight of the value of people's identity, their sense of belonging, and why that was so closely related to mental well being. And so, for me, in a lot of senses, I've continued doing that work, enabling people to connect with their own stories, and I'm just doing it in a different place in this industry. I never would have seen myself there, but it's something which is really powerful.
Amazing. I mean, you've touched on a couple of times already that Kromanti Rum is a celebration of heritage and culture. How do you incorporate this celebration into your marketing and branding strategies? Um,
Yeah, good question. I think one of the things we do, so I'll give you an example. Last summer, we ran a community dominoes event, which Cromanti sponsored. We invited friends and family across the generations to spend an afternoon together playing dominoes and telling each other stories. Now, that those are the really important things. That's where we grew up, very much in Huddersfield. Um, so those are really important moments because they are about reducing isolation, bringing people together, crossing generations, which are all they're all indicative of more healthy society and individuals within those society who have a good sense of who they are, their sense of belonging, and also the ability to work with people who are the same as them and also different from them. Now, that was a really important thing for us to do as an event. And we've continued to have partnerships with organizations who are actually on the same page in terms of celebrating who we are and our unique way of expressing ourselves.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, you and I are from Grenadian heritage, um, from the wonderful island of Carriacou,
Gary
and
Koo.
we know in Grenada the number one rum is Jack Iron. So
Yes.
I want to ask you, are we wanting to complement Jack? Are we trying to replace Jack? Is there room for both Cremante and Jack?
There's room for both. There's room for both. You're right. I mean, Jack Iron was what we saw big people drinking when we was little. That was something that the older heads used to indulge in. And Cashain has got a very emotional place, certainly for me and for most kayaks throughout the world. 5 years ago, I was in Grenada and actually went down to the Westerhall distillery and spent some time talking with the chief executive of Westerhall Rums, who produced the Cashain. And it was interesting because when we were started moving the conversation into how he supplies to Carriacou, he said, actually, it's one of the most difficult markets because one, when they bring the rum onto the island, often people will use different types of infusions and sell them under the counter. Now, that's the thing that really interested me because a lot of that is family recipes. It's what people know about what's good for this type of complaint, whether or not you drink it, whether or not you rub it on your skin. A range of different things happen. And it's that particular thing that I think is the most interesting for me, because that's very much rooted in people and their knowledge that they passed on from one generation to another. As my daughter Danielle, who could be on this call, she was in Dominica and St. Lucia only a few weeks ago, and that was specifically to spend times in rum shops in order to understand a bit more about the different herbal infusions that seem to be a variant wherever you go. Um, and I think for those people who would like to, please have a look at our YouTube channel. Just type in Kromanti Rum in YouTube, you'll see our YouTube channel. But that film of that experience is going to be on there some point during the next few months. So that's going to be a really interesting thing to start sharing this insight into rum and the relationship that we as a people have with rum, which is very different from the mainstream brands and how they present themselves.
Cashain, it's been absolutely fascinating. I have one final question for you. Now
Okay.
you've turned into an entrepreneur, a
Yes.
businessman. My final question to you is, what would be the top 3 attributes that you feel one needs to be an entrepreneur or to run a business?
I think the first one is persistence, because wanting to make money out of being an entrepreneur is just not enough. There are going to be times where you think all is lost, it's terrible, you're not making sales, and you have to have something that drives you to continue to do this thing over and over again. And I think that that's really that's my number one thing. The other thing is about flexibility. Um, you know, opportunities appear in a range of different places, that many of them that you wouldn't expect. Always be open to seeing things as an opportunity and relationships as an opportunity. So you have to invest for a long period of time before you see the results, and that's just normal. And I think the third thing is build a network. You start with your family, you extend it onto your friends and your acquaintances, and then people in the industry that you're interested in, and then the wider communities, because you can't do these things on your own. This whole idea of the sole entrepreneur that builds businesses is simply false. I think we are often part of and benefit from other people, their knowledge, their experience, their goodwill, just to say, carry on going. I really like what you did, or that they will tell somebody else about what you did and your product, and those connections get made. We had a really interesting conversation. I was part of the Windrush 75 celebrations in London and the committee that was planning that. And a chance conversation led us to be enlisted in the bar at the Royal Albert Hall. So you never know where your opportunities are going to come from. And those are the things that you constantly have to be looking out for and being open to.
Thank you so much, Cashain, for taking the time out today to be with us and for sharing your fascinating and inspiring journey with Kromanti Rum. We want to wish you all success with the growth and development of the business so that you'll reach greater significance and higher heights within the industry. For anybody who wants further information on Kromanti or to maybe purchase any of their merchandise, please visit their website at www.kromantirum.com. Thank you to our followers for taking the time to tune into the African Descendants Forum, and see you next time on the ADF Movers and Shakers across the African diaspora. See you soon.